All right, everyone. Thanks for being here. Rick Jackson, in particular, you will probably need to use your very loud voice because I'm asking the readers to project because we do have the speaker on in the mic, and I'm talking loudly, but it's still a little quiet. So that's all I can say. If you have troubles hearing, I recommend we've got a whole row of front seats right now for you to get up there. I am almost like touching the mic, so that's what all I can do.
Excuse me.
Okay. Thanks everyone for being here. This is our third event for the 40th Meacham anniversary. We have a lot of fun alum from out of town here and people from Chattanooga. My friends even came out. So I was like, wow, I think it was the free wine that food. Yes. So anyway, we do have a lot of readers tonight, so I won't spend too long. I just want to thank everyone for being here. Please remember we have another event tomorrow night in the Lott reading room, which will be celebrating the book launch of an anthology published by Press 53. You can buy that anthology here, but the book launch will be tomorrow night, and those were put together by some former UTC students, and the students in there are all former UTC students, so it's super cool. And so I hope that you will, aspiring writers and published writers will buy that book, and you can get lots of signatures, and we will have another food and alcoholic and adult beverage reception tomorrow night as well. So thanks everyone for being here. It just means a lot to us to come out, and we're going to have Charlotte Caldwell, who, what's your title? Director of Stoneworks. I just think of her as like, she's the top person at Stoneworks. She's the one with the vision. Not that everyone else doesn't have vision. She was the first person with the vision. She's the OG. So anyway, I will let Charlotte tell you about Stoneworks, and then we will, Danielle will be introducing the readers tonight.
Hi everybody, I'm just going to yell. Can you guys hear me? Yes. All right. I'm more in the habit of yelling than I am in speaking in a mic, so this suits me a little bit better, right? Obviously, thank you to staff. Yes, Stoneworks was kind of my brainchild, but it couldn't be done without the incredible support of the people that I get to work with. So I'm endlessly grateful for their participation in these programs. If this is your first time at Stoneworks, welcome. We're really thrilled to have you. We are primarily a visual arts organization, as you might be able to tell from the exhibition that we have in the exhibition space. But there are a lot of ways that we do host writers on site, including in our residency program. We have about 10 writers a year, or hopefully about 10 writers a year come through, and we're always grateful for Meacham's participation in that review process as well. So in addition to welcoming you guys here on site, we also have the luxury of a continuing relationship with y'all, not just as it helps inform our programs, but also as it brings you here. So yeah, I'm just going to keep it short and sweet. If you have questions, I know you're not here to listen to me talk, so, but if you do have questions about our program, I'm happy to entertain them afterwards. I have a lot of things that I can say about what we do. So
I recommend, they have an amazing calendar of events, so you just can subscribe to their newsletter like I do, and there's always something really cool going on. Lots of neat little workshops for anyone who wants to do things like sewing and chapbook making and all kinds of, I've been bird watching with them, so make sure that you sign up for the newsletter. And I will say, this year has had a bit of a blip, but generally, and Stoneworks has been great. We do have a partnership with Stoneworks where we have started to review their candidates for the writing residency. And when it's possible, we try to have a Meacham Fellow, which is they're staying at the Stoneworks residency, and then for a month they will go do community events, writing events and workshops in the community and at UTC. So we are There was just some alignment issues this year, but we'll be back on track for that in the fall, so look out for that. There will be some other, writers from the community, and that was really thanks to Stoveworks and them being open to work with us on that, so thank you for that.
I guess I will plug, we do have 3 events tomorrow. We do have bird watching tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. We have an artist, a resident-led workshop tomorrow from 1 to 3. They'll be designing coats of arms, so I would definitely recommend it. It's going to be super rad, so come to that. And then after that, we have from 3 to 5 our open studios, which is the only time every month that we allow the public into the residency area for 2 hours. You get to go in and actually talk to the artists who are creating work. You can see them at practice and what they're working on. So it's a really neat way to gain a little insight into an artist's practice. Definitely recommend you guys come to all of those. So yeah, handing it over.
I can just skip Meacham tomorrow and come here, right? All right, Mark Cox is our first reader tonight. Mark Cox has published 7 volumes of poetry, most recently Readiness and Knowing, which is just out from Press 53. Cox has a 40-year publication history in prominent magazines and has received the Writing Writers Award, a Pushcart Prize, and numerous fellowships for that work. He chairs the Department of Creative Writing at the University of North Carolina, Wilmington, and also teaches in the Vermont College MFA program. Alan Shapiro says of Mark's work, beyond the inventive language and formal range, what makes this work so memorable is Cox's refusal to look away from even the hardest facts of unadulterated sorrow. This isn't my first Meacham with Mark Cox. My first Meacham with Mark Cox was 30 years ago when I was a freshman. And I had a conference with him over my work, so he was one of the earliest influences to my writing. I think his second book, Smolder, was just out at that time. So it's a real honor to be here again to hear Mark. I know he did a lot for me and my fellow students.
Appreciate that. Well, I'm really thrilled to be here. I was trying to figure out exactly when my first Meacham would have been, and it might have been 35 years ago, the first time. I've been here several times over the years, and some of my most fond memories of writing get-togethers with colleagues are right here. So I'm delighted and honored to be part of the 40th anniversary of this event. It's really quite wonderful. And I'm grateful also for the kind of professional development that it allowed me over time. I think meeting with the students here was always challenging and interesting, and it meant a lot to me ultimately in terms of growth as a teacher. So I think an awful lot of this place and the faculty who all put it together. I'm going to read for, I don't know, somewhere around 12 minutes, I think, three poems. A couple of them are a little bit longer, so you'll have to kind of stick with me through. This first one is called True North. Looking back for a low point marking the worst of my insobriety, it might have been that signal moment I put out my cigarette in the holy water font of St. Paul's Catholic Church, right in front of the priest, I might add, who was too stunned to reach in and remove the soggy stub, but who looked at me with such fervent scorn I could feel his ire through the entire service. What was I to do? The water had been so still, and the font had really seemed so much like an ashtray. It was by an entrance. It all made complete sense to me. This was the 70s, of course, which is why I was even smoking inside the church at all. That made complete sense to everyone then. And I was young, and as I implied before, would have been imbibing at the time. We were there for a wedding, and I was a Protestant guest. an outsider unschooled in the mysteries of the Roman Catholic order, naive about its rituals and rules. I probably kneeled when I wasn't supposed to. God knows I may have stretched out on the pew for all I remember. I suspect we had been celebrating the nuptials some days in advance. I suspect I was standing before God with the matchbook of a strip club in my pocket, and it probably bathed with a washcloth at best, dressing hastily in the back of a van with carpet on its walls. Now, surely my soul was bound for hell. There was no sweet talking my way out of this one. Even thinking of it now, I shudder a bit. I can hear the woman behind me gasp as that red-hot Camel Stray hissed against the surface of the water. I can see it floating there, turning a little from side to side, like a compass needle coming to true north. The paper's glue starting to give way, flecks of tobacco bobbing at the charred end. Bless me, Father, for I have sinned, big time. I am sorry about the scene I caused. I am sorry about the shame. I am not, however, sorry about that bridesmaid. In fact, my only regret is that I don't remember more of her. But then that is the tragedy of youth. You can't have it forever, not even in memory, especially when you've slaughtered as many brain cells as me. But there's no use crying over spilt, well, bourbon. I am a model citizen now. I go to bed early. I'm asleep by 10 o'clock. I don't recall my dreams, and my days follow one upon another like the pickets of a snow-white fence. What have I learned? There's a hair's difference between self-love and self-harm, both being self-importance and delusion. Ironically, I had to prove how unimportant I truly was before I could be happy being trivial. I needed to stand before God as a complete buffoon to make peace with my imperfectness. I had an ego I really should have been licensed to carry. And what about that font? Should I have recognized what it was right off? Should I have guessed it was something sacred? At the very least, I should have plucked that butt post-haste, secreting it in my pocket while slinking into the sanctuary. But I was as shocked as everyone else, and ultimately shamed and clueless, I just shambled to the back pews. The bride and groom lasted 16 years. They had a good run, but those vows didn't make it a lifetime. I'm rarely in touch with any of that crew anymore. Our aisles have led in separate directions. I'm still embarrassed, though few attendees could recall my name. I'm just the out-of-town dickwad who ashed in the holy water. I suppose there may come a day when I'm questioned at the pearly gates and St. Peter will want to know if it's true, if I'm the one, if I'm the hooligan he's heard about. And what can I say? It was yours truly. I did it. But I quit smoking a long time ago, and serious drinking, and going to church too, for that matter. So it never happened again. That ought to count for something. I worry about my 99-year-old mother reading because even though she's got a bad memory, the only thing she'd remember is strip club and stop going to church. I'm going to switch gears for just a minute. Being back here has made me think a lot about some of the colleagues that I spent time with here. And one was Jack Myers, who many of you will remember fondly, the late Jack Myers. And so I thought I would do a poem for him while I'm here. This is called The Dance. Jack, if you are looking for me, my room's at the back, in the far depths of the Boston Sheraton, its locked window overlooking a shaft of brick and exhaust covers, a maintenance court squared by 4 distinct wings. Here the shaded wind is trapped, less sure. Split off from upper currents, it vacillates and veers, a dizzying indecision embodied in the snow it wields. Urgent, whirling cyclones of it, swept from rooftop heaps by happenstance. Watching this recalls the shoreline at Winthrop and how we set some ashes just beyond the water's edge, where the tide would rise and claim you. You would become so very small. It seemed more just than trusting fickle winds, and it felt wrong to cast you on the waters, to see you drown in a dark your poems forestalled. Instead, the welling deep came almost tenderly, tugging first at the edges of the mound, then seeping inward to dampen the core, to draw you not so much out into the ocean as down into the rich coast shore, a piece below the current's roiling reach. There, on that beach, it was as if some timeless otherness proffered passage. No, Jackie, nothing quite so trite or grand. It was more a sweaty, steadfast partner, guiding you toward a crowded floor, and music we can enter but never understand. The last poem. This one is called Gasoline. Even all these years after the divorce, I still sometimes dream we are together. She and I will be rushing, hand in hand, late for a movie, or we'll be planning our daughter's birthday, surrounded by cupcakes. In the dream, I actually know what is ahead, all the accusations and craziness, but there is something hopeful about the way she touches me, even still. I think there will always be a bond, even after so much betrayal, even after the sting of those deceptions is past. The children will always be our children. You would never undo that. Ask me what these dreams mean to my life now, and I don't have an answer. I have loved other women. I have failed other women and will undoubtedly continue to do so. One dream I remember had a security camera in one corner of the room. Its red light let me know that it was on. I leaned over then and kissed her. I wanted someone to see it, I think. I wanted the guard to know how it used to be for us. Or for me, I guess. For me. But really, I don't romanticize the past all that much. I know how bad things got. I know she could never change. I know I tried, but it didn't. And those are the stark facts. Our children wept. They were just babies, so shocked and confused. A moment like that leaves its scars on a person. It changes you chemically. Sometimes I suspect I am no good for anyone else. Not as if I were a dead end, more like I'm not even a road. I mean, she was not some incurable disease, but there is an inner skin I apparently can't shed. These simple things I dream, my spirit's way of reminding me what it was to feel that deeply, to love that much. You want that again with someone, with anyone, but you can never have it. You can only be destroyed like that once in your life. Nothing after will ever come close. After, you handle intimacy as if it were a dangerous fluid. You use approved containers. You don't smoke in the same room. And maybe that is how to envision these dreams, as vessels for feeling. They help me carry her from one side of my life to the other. There is my little daughter with icing on her nose. There is the empty car seat that is still in the attic. There is my son learning to ride his bike on another man's street. I am not an idiot. I know better than to pine for all that has vanished behind me. In fact, I am face forward usually, a striking picture of good health, braced headlong against the wind. Well, more or less. Still, I am surprised to be here. I thought my life would turn out differently. I expected better from and for myself. And so, though reconciliation isn't something I want to happen in real life, in my dreams, it's okay. In my dreams, nothing cruel or unforgivable has transpired between us yet. In those dreams, it's as fresh and untouched. It's a pleasure to feel that fully again, to have the family under one roof. Even now, I like to think of that old guard monitoring the security cameras, him just noticing how nice it must have been. That's all I really wanted, was for life to be easy, right, fluid. It didn't seem like a lot to ask for at the time. Thank you.
Okay, our next author is Lott. Is that correct? It's now.
Here.
All right. Lott is the best-selling author of 14 books, most recently the nonfiction collection Letters in Life on Being a Writer, on Being a Christian, and the novel Dead Low Tide. He is also author of the novel Jewel, which was an Oprah Book Club pick. His work has appeared in, among other places, the Yale Review, the New York Times, the Georgia Review, and in dozens of anthologies. Brett was born in Los Angeles and got his MFA in fiction from UMass Amherst, where he studied under James Baldwin. He's taught at the College of Charleston, been editor and director of the Southern Review, and his honors include being named a Fulbright Senior American Scholar and the Writer-in-Residence to Bar Ilan University in Tel Aviv, Israel. Speaking at the White House on Flannery O'Connor, and having served as a member of the National Council of the Arts. The New York Times has said of Brett, Lott is one of the most important and imaginative writers in America today. His eye for detail is unparalleled. His vision, where he looks, is like no one else's in this country. Brett.
It's amazing what 20 bucks will do, even at the New York Times. I'm Brett, glad to be here. It's an honor. I'm sorry I wasn't able to make yesterday. This morning, I teach at the College of Charleston. I've taught there since 1986, and I have 9 class days before I retire. Yesterday was number 10. I'm counting down. So, and then I'm going to join the august ranks of Rick Jackson. And Mark Hawks has how many days left?
3.
3 days left. We counted.
I have 97 days total. but
90.
3 left.
So, but I'm honored to be here. This is, I think, my 4th Meacham. But the first one off campus. I think this is really cool. Great space. You know, really nice. So thank you, Sybil and Lauren. I wrote an email to Sybil. Where are you?
Right over here.
There you are.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
accidentally typoed. I said, you know, you started Dear Sybil, and I wrote Dead Sybil. And then I sent it, and then I reread it. And go, I said, I think Dead Sybil was a punk band.
If not, we will do that. It'll be hard to talk about.
So this book is called Gather the Olives, and it's a nonfiction. And I need to read the beginning of this. It's about our living in Israel. And this is the little foreword that I needed to write for this book after. It's self-explanatory. It's called A Word. Is the beginning. I turned this book into the publisher in the summer of 2023. Then came the horrors of October 7th and after. Immediately, these pages became missives from before, and now, as you read these words, they are operating in the after. There is no going back. Yet here's a book. It is about food and about communion. It is about taste and people and place. It is about breaking bread and with whom we break it. My wife Melanie and I lived in Jerusalem for a while, 5 months to be exact, and have stayed there for extended periods for, at last count, a half dozen times. We've traveled to the West Bank, to East Jerusalem, and to Ramallah. We've been to one side and the other of the wall and found good and beautiful people on both. But let it be known that I am no expert on Israel, no professional guide or apologist or even dilettante. Please don't imagine this will be anything like a cookbook or a list of suggested tours, or a book on war, barbarity, retribution, or responses measured or disproportionate. It is not a book on social justice or political stance or a solving of the Middle East situation, one state or two state or war or peace protracted or paused. By the time you read these words, the world will move forward into realms unknown. And even these terms I've prated about just now will seem antiquated because of whatever new news will have arrived via the predictable ways news of the world arrives. This is a book about another story to this place, one of people to people, in the way when sharing a meal, whether cherries from a roadside stand or pork ribs sauced and grilled on the stoop of an Arabic apartment, there could be peace. We lived there and visited, and have partaken in meals with more people through the years, Israeli and Palestinian alike, than we can count. From falafel with newfound friends at the best street corner shawarma stand in Jerusalem's German colony, the place set with maybe a dozen plastic chairs and a window out onto the street, to a lunch of innumerable fresh salads cluttered across a flowered plastic tablecloth in a family's home at the border with Lebanon, the father seeking to restore the Aramaic language as far and wide as he can, to a food truck hamburger at a minor league baseball game, the diamond settled in a field of sunflowers outside Beit Shemesh, where the Ark of the Covenant first came to rest after the Philistines had sent the tumor-inducing thing back to Israel on a wooden cart pulled by those straight-arrow milk cows. We've eaten in a lot of places, and we've met good people all along the way. This is a book about them. This is a book about their places. This is a book about their food. It is an account from before, yes, but it is an account of the way food and place and people inform and enlighten and broaden and magnify what it means to be human. Now that we are after, there is no going back. But now, as forever, there is hope. With this book, I'm trying to give a glimpse of that hope, because hope still lives. So, thank you. And you know what, I need to take a picture of the people. My wife will not believe there's standing room only for something that I was. I'm serious.
Do you want me to take the picture?
Sure, you can do
Yeah,
that.
in it?
Yeah.
Sure. Look at all these beautiful people, you know?
You better get Brett in there so she'll believe it.
That's true.
Well, I guess.
Nice.
See if I got it.
Oh, that's beautiful. Okay, so it's all about food and people and everything, but I want to read this little piece that says that there were different things to drink. We were always drinking things. And this is a section, a little essay. It's a bunch of essays about food and the people, but this is a little interlude called What to Drink, and this one is tea. Plenty of friends came to visit while we lived in Jerusalem, giving us more than enough reason to see pretty much all the holy sites in Israel. But in January, once our dear friends Jeff and Hart from Charleston had spent the week touring all things Jerusalem, we decided to take a quick trip out of Israel and go to see Petra, the ancient city carved into sandstone canyons over in Jordan. Things were complicated getting there. First, the 5-hour drive down to Lott on the Red Sea, the day bright blue and very cold, the road long and lonesome from Jerusalem east to the Dead Sea, then straight south. All the while, and as ever, the land could have been the desert between Los Angeles and Las Vegas, except this was Israel. Not just Israel, but Old Testament Israel. We passed halfway down, and beside the very end of the turquoise Dead Sea, a rather large rock formation called Lott's Wife that did, in its way, and at the right angle, resemble a woman looking back. She stood at the base of Mount Sodom. This was Old Testament Israel. Then 2 hours of desert farther south, here arrived the startling surprise of the deep blue Red Sea. Deep, deep blue and beautiful. Beside it sat sharp, square eruptions of white resort hotels and restaurants, the resort town of Lott. Sailboats, minuscule triangles, cut along on the wind on that dumbfoundingly blue water. Brown desert mountains on both sides of the bay cupped the city and the water and those boats out there in all their hands. On down the right side of the bay lay Egypt. To the left, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, a couple miles farther down that coast. 4 countries in one grand view. Next came the border crossing at Aqaba, the Jordanian resort town settled beside Lott. Fewer hotels, but still right there on the beach. But to get into Jordan and so to Petra, there was the border to cross. No rented Israeli cars can enter Jordan, so we parked in a small lot set up just for this purpose. As per standard operating tourist procedure, we'd arranged to have a taxi waiting for us on the other side for the rest of the drive. 2 more hours up to Wadi Musa, the town at the entrance to the Slot Canyon into Petra. The border buildings looked more like an outdoor car wash and bus station in that same California and Nevada desert than an international border between 2 countries known for the wars between them. Metal awnings atop poles, a kind of long and low and narrow building with different sets of windows, each with its cutout passway for sliding through a passport. From there, we walked another 100 yards or so between passport control on the Israel side to the same set of buildings on the Jordan side, each of us toting a duffel as we walked the rough macadam road between countries. We were the only ones there, January in the off season for this sort of thing. Once through Jordan passport control, we saw a taxi in the parking lot. A man leaned against the hood. He'd emailed us a picture of himself. Aref was his name, a slightly older man with salt and pepper hair and a thick gray mustache. And once introductions had been made all around, Aref gracious and smiling as he loaded our duffels into the trunk, we piled into the car, me in the front seat, the rest in the back. Aref started the engine and Arabic music came on the radio. Oud, violin, a drum and tambourine, what sounded like a flute and another stringed instrument. The oud was the only one I knew the name for, mandolin-like and with a big belly. Above it all, the high nasal voice of the singer. More California desert, but now we were in Jordan, headed up through a craggy pass and into the higher desert, then up onto the King's Highway, a blue road sign right there at my window proclaiming as such, King's Highway in English. Above it, words in Arabic, I could only assume for the same. Here we were, on that route Moses walked when he led the whole nation toward home. Here we were, right here, in a taxi and driving it. But it was a long ride, and we were tired. And we were hungry. Conversation lulled, the ref still with the radio on, most all the songs very much alike. And so, just to fill the car with words to make small talk to this man we'd spent so long with already, I asked him, "What is this song about?" He smiled, nodded, his eyes to the road, to the radio, to the road. "Okay," he said and nodded. Then he said about listening and nodding, listening, nodding, all while the high-pitched voice tremoloing on. Finally, he nodded hard once and said, "There's this boy." He nodded along again, listening, and nodded hard once more. "He loves this girl," he said, and went on listening, nodding, listening. Then he smiled, gave that hard nod one more time, and said, "But she does not love him." He glanced at me, slowly nodded. There's what this song is about. We all burst out laughing, and I turned to Jeff in the back seat, said, "Country music is everywhere." The ref laughed as well. He knew American country music too. He said, "Johnny Cash," right then. All of us heading higher and higher on the King's Highway up toward Petra. We arrived after dark in Wadi Rum and checked into the hotel at the entrance to Petra, then spent the next day just as cold and sun-drenched as the one before, hiking the bright and towering red stone ghosts of the ancient city. We hiked and hiked, surrounded all day long by tombs and monuments, temples and edifices, pillars and staircases and homes and an amphitheater too, all carved into brilliant red sandstone and brilliant mauve, brilliant magenta and beige and brown and cinnabar sandstone, all just as brilliant in this sun and in this cold. But the next morning there came a snowstorm, unheralded, a surprise. And we found ourselves snowbound in a ref's taxi at the crest of the King's Highway, only halfway to Aqaba, elevation 5,000 feet, hours and hours and hours from Jerusalem. A ref had assured us before we left, light snow falling on us as he loaded our duffels into the trunk out front of the hotel, that the snow was no hazard, that we would be safe. "We can make it," he said, smiling, but in it a kind of tension, a kind of vague qualm, The ends of his mustache went up with a smile, but his eyes showed none of it. And so we left, radio off, only to drive into light snow that turned into heavier snow, that turned into a blizzard, the cab slowing and slowing and slowing until it mired fully in the snow. The ref turned to us then, no smile to his face, and said, "We cannot make it." He called in to report what had happened and assured all would be well, all would be well. And 45 minutes later, members of the Jordanian army, yes, the Jordanian army, emerged from the white all around us, men in drab green heavy jackets at our snowed over windows. They'd driven their emergency response truck as close as they could to us, then hiked the rest of the way up the King's Highway to the taxi. We were relieved. Jeff and I helped the soldiers push the taxi out of its fix, and as soon as we rocked it free, a ref pulled away and drove off. He couldn't park and wait for us to climb back in because we'd get stuck in the snow again, of course. That left Jeff, me, and 5 soldiers to walk a mile or so through a blizzard back to their rescue truck. Along the way, we pitched snowball fights, America versus Jordan. I actually yelled that out as I reared back to launch a snowball and was nailed in the shoulder before I could even let go. All of us were laughing, talking. They all spoke perfect English, one of them a Michigan grad, while we tried our best not to think of the cold. Then here was the rescue truck, emergency yellow, sharp and big with its pug-faced grill and running boards 2 feet above the snow-packed road. We all climbed into the warm quad cab, the driver inside and ready to go. 8 of us jammed inside a cab meant for 6. Jeff and I in the back seat in the middle, a soldier on either side of us. We were in, settled. We ate talking, joshing. We were in, settled. We ate talking and joshing, ready to find our taxi somewhere on the road back toward Petra. But now one of the men in the front seat pulled from the floorboard a battered thermos. And another soldier up there produced from somewhere a stack of 4 thick glass tumblers. The one with the thermos unscrewed the lid and poured out steaming hot amber tea into first one glass, then another, both held by the one who brought out the tumblers, who then handed them back to Jeff and to me. The first 2 glasses of hot tea in the midst of a blizzard we were all suffering through. I don't even like tea, but I cannot remember tasting anything as perfect as that sweet and strong hot tea, its steam immediately clouding over my glasses. Amber tea, sweet beyond sweet, yet not staggeringly so. A jet blast of warm sugar tempered by the earth of the tea and the cool lip of the glass it had been poured into. That was when Jeff, glass in hand, turned to me and said, laughing, "This is going to be a great story." "Yes, it will," I said. Thank you very much.
Our next reader is Sybil Baker. Sybil's latest novel, Apparitions, is the winner of the 2024 IPPY Gold Medal in Short Fiction. She is the author of 5 books of fiction, including While You Were Gone, which won the IPPY Silver Medal. She was awarded 2 Make Work Artist grants and an individual artist fellowship from the Tennessee Arts Commission. Her work has appeared in a variety of publications, including Guernica, Electric Literature, Glimmer Train, and Critical Flame. Sybil is a professor of creative writing at UT Chattanooga and is director of the Meacham Writers Conference and is on the faculty of the Yale Writers Workshop. According to author Kevin Wilson, Sybil Baker has the enviable ability to populate her work with characters who feel so nuanced and real that you can't believe that you haven't always known these people, that they haven't always been a part of your life. Sybil.
Okay, before I start, I just wanted to give a shout out to Earl Braggs and Richard Jackson and Tom the Laws. Where are you? There we go. So Tom and I started in 2007 at UTC. We were both fiction hires, and Earl and Richard were just from the beginning, I think, just really helped us just really just, we were over at their houses drinking wine, like before with classes even started. And and like right at the very first Meacham, I was somehow on the front porch of Rick's house drinking wine with these amazing writers. Like, how did I get here? This is so cool. And they would give me, it was a different world back then, and they would give us advice on, how to survive academia, which I think has gotten much more cutthroat. So when Tom and I first came, the advice was, publish wherever you can, even if it's the paper napkin review. That's what Rick told me. And that worked back then. And so it was just always great. And, of course, Rick Jackson with Meacham, but Earl has always been at Meacham too, and has been the #1 supporter, and always comes to all the events, and his, always reading, he was always writing new stuff for Meacham. So I just really appreciate how they've just really helped Tom and I through these years and provided the role models for us. So. Okay, I'm going to read the back flap of the book, and then I'm going to read the very end of chapter 1 and then a part of chapter 2. Just so you know what it's about. So it doesn't say this in the book, but now I found out that these days women in menopause books are very popular, and that's what this is about. It came out a couple years before the wave, but it doesn't say that, but that's what this book is about. After Simone learns that her ex-husband Guy has died unexpectedly at the age of 50, her only regret is that she didn't expose his affairs when she had the chance. But when a woman asks her to help her disrupt his celebration of life planned in northern Cyprus, Simone wonders if she has a last chance to reveal Guy's hypocrisy. Accompanied by her best friend Agnes, Simone arrives in Cyprus. However, the circumstances surrounding Guy's death become increasingly mysterious. Worse, since Guy's death, Simone has been haunted by Guy and the ghosts of her loved ones, warning her of impending danger. As the celebration approaches and Simone's mental state deteriorates, she must decide who she should trust and who she must betray in order to save herself. So the end of chapter 1 begins with one of the first ghosts visiting her. They've just arrived Agnes have arrived in Istanbul. They're asleep at the hotel. So that's where we'll begin. Despite my hopes that the ghost had abandoned me, an apparition appeared after my underwater dream. Be careful. Who is this? We used to sit in coffee shops, drinking instant coffee served in fake British-style cups and saucers, while your traitorous husband studied Korea. Soo Jung? And then I went to the States to get my master's degree, and some women in San Francisco took advantage of my loneliness, swindling me out of my savings, and I called you to borrow money so I wouldn't have to go back to Korea. I was always grateful to you for that. I owe you. You paid me back. Remember how Guy seemed irritated when you phoned him on his cell about wiring the money, how he said he was busy and couldn't talk? I'd forgotten. He was with that girl, Sarah. That's why he was so distant with you. You should have figured it out then. What do you want? You helped me when no one else did. After you left Ansan, I came back with my master's degree and got a job as an English teacher at the girls' high school. One day, 2 years ago, I should say this is 2016, I went with my students on the ferry to Jeju Island. As you know, that was the fateful ferry, the one that sank. I read about it. I saw your name in the list of those who had died. There weren't enough life jackets and my students couldn't swim, so of course I stayed to help them. You drowned saving them. Why are you here? To save you. Please be careful. You're in a fragile state. We're worried you might do something rash, something you can't undo. We? It's not a fun way to go, drowning. Your body feels like it's going to burst, and when you open your mouth to breathe, you only swallow more water. But my final actions have rewarded me here. I'm accorded much more respect than I ever had in Lott. Soo Jung, I'm sorry we lost touch. I'm sorry you died so young, but I'm not fragile, I'm not dangerous. I'm boring, actually. And you're right, I should have known about Guy back then. I should have known from the sound of his voice, distant and unfamiliar and flat, like I was some stranger he didn't want to know. I should have known. You ignored the signs. This time, don't make the same mistake. So this is June 29, 2016. When I awake the next morning, the room was still cloaked in darkness thanks to the blackout curtains, so I turned on the bedside lamp to find my way to the bathroom. Agnes, curled under the covers like a small child, quietly slept without disruptions, without ghosts. Our flight to Urchan, the airport in northern Cyprus, wasn't until the afternoon, so I decided not to wake her in case she tried to talk me into going to see the Blue Mosque. Why did Sue Jung's ghost visit me last night? Was she warning me not to disrupt Guy's celebration of life? Guy had long stopped being my business. Why had I agreed to help someone I'd never met sabotage my ex's celebration? Why would I stand on some podium in front of a group of people gathered to mourn Guy and tell them that Guy was a fake, a snake oil salesman, a con man? I would rob them of their delusions, ruin his legacy in one final speech he was not alive to refute. I was still angry at Guy, angry at him for betraying me, angry at him for never apologizing, for not being there when I was treated for breast cancer, angry at him for dying, and angry at myself for not warning more people that he was not to be trusted. Most of those things I couldn't do anything about, except the last one. I now had the chance to tell people that Guy's acting like some kind of spiritual guru was being like some kind of spiritual being was a con, something I should have done long ago. That was why I told myself I was here. But Sue Jung's ghost didn't seem to like my reasoning, and now I was second-guessing the whole enterprise. We could still cancel the flight to Urchan, spend some time in Istanbul, then fly back home. It wasn't too late. I quietly dressed and took the elevator to the first floor to order our room service breakfast and pick up one of the newspapers in English I'd spotted when we checked in. After stopping by the restaurant and ordering Turkish breakfast for our room, I found a few copies of the International Herald Tribune stacked on the counter in the check-in desk. The clerk's back was facing me. He was watching the TV screen, sound muted. When I picked up the paper, he turned and placed a shaky hand on mine. "Don't worry," he said in a thin voice, "you're safe." On the TV, a man appeared in an open area, set down a black duffel bag, and ran. The screen flashed white. Beneath the footage, I picked up the word Ataturk among the Turkish commentary running at the bottom. Unwilling to wait for the elevator, I climbed the 4 flights of stairs to our room. Agnes in her hotel robe was awake drinking tea on her bed. I dropped the paper in my bed and turned on the TV. All the Turkish stations were broadcasting live, showing figures and footage of a man with a rifle and black bag walking through an airport, followed by a detonation and people running, dragging suitcases and small screaming children. Shattered glass falling from roofs. Police and ambulances carrying the injured away. Interviews with survivors sobbing into the camera. I switched the channels until I landed on CNN International. Before I could even hear the newscaster, I read the chyron running at the bottom of the screen. Breaking news: 3 attackers open fire and detonate bombs at Ataturk Airport. The newscaster reported that the gunfire and explosions had occurred in the international arrivals terminal at around 10 at night, the terminal we'd arrived in that afternoon. 49 dead, 239 injured. While no one was yet claiming responsibility, the newscaster said authorities were blaming ISIS. As we watched the repeated images of shattered glass, rifle shots, bleeding people, there was a knock on the door. I leapt from the bed and cracked the door, leaving the chain on. A man dressed in street clothes held a tray laden with feta cheese, Turkish sausage, yogurt, tomato and cucumbers, olives, boiled eggs, crusty bread, butter, and honey, along with a pot of Turkish tea. We set the tray on the small table and dug in. Despite, or perhaps because of our near miss with death, we were both ravenous, and the food tasted especially delicious. After I stuffed a final piece of bread topped with feta, I wiped the crumbs from my lips, glanced back at the explosions being repeated on the TV. "Did I ever tell you about Sue Jung?" I asked. "Wasn't she a friend of yours in Korea?" Agnes popped an olive in her mouth. "For a while. She went to the States for graduate school, but we lost touch after Guy and I split up. After she finished her degree, she went back to her hometown to teach. And remember the Saywall ferry sinking 2 years ago? She died saving her students. I don't know why I didn't tell you. I'm so sorry, Simone. She visited me last night, saying she was trying to save me, that I needed to be careful. And look, we almost got killed in a terrorist attack, Agnes. But we didn't. We're still here. I don't have to go. Of course you do. Tell your story, closure and all that. Sue Jung is warning me. Us. This is not an omen, Agnes said. Of course it's not an omen. My arms tightened around my chest. It's the world. Still, I think this is a mistake. And it may have been a mistake, but I decided with Agnes's convincing that if this was a mistake, it was my mistake to make, something the world couldn't take away from me, no matter how hard it tried. Thank you.
Our next reader tonight is Earl Braggs. Earl is a North Carolina native from the rural backwoods fishing community of Tennessee. Earl Sherman Braggs is a UC Foundation and Battle Professor of English at the University of Tennessee at Chattanooga. Braggs is the author of 14 collections of poetry. His latest are, Cat Dancing with Miss Bessie Smith, Cruising Weather Blues, and Negro Side of the Moon. Among his many awards are the NPE Poetry Prize, the Cleveland, Ohio State Poetry Prize, the CNR Poetry Prize, the Jack Kerouac International Literary Prize, the Knoxville News Sentinel Poetry Award, and the Gloucester County Poetry Prize. By the way, one of those he wasn't able to accept because he got 2 simultaneous publication awards. I've never heard of that happening. Bragg's novel, Looking for Jack Kerouac, was a finalist for the James Jones First Novel Contest, and he has a forthcoming book from Mad Hill Press called Obama's Children. Or is that out now?
Yeah, that's
out. I may have pulled something along. I'm so sorry. The author, Rick Campbell, says Earl Braggs is his own man. His poems are a personal and public history of America, told in numerous personas, poetic syntax, and a dancing rhythmic narrative that carries the reader into stories that seem familiar, yet are often a bit askew. I mentioned that Mark Cox was at one of my first Meachams 30 years ago. Earl Braggs is at every one of the Meachams I've been at. I think maybe one of the he is part of the institution of Meacham. I had Earl as a professor as an undergrad, and I learned a lot from him about sound and timing in poetry. And thank you so much, Earl, for the lessons you gave me and for the readings you've blessed us with. Earl Braggs.
So Mark Cox was my first teacher in graduate school. And he did not mention me. Perhaps it was because I was the worst student in the class, or the best student in the class. But being me, Earl Braggs, I prefer the latter. The poem that I'm going to read today is called Sonnet Left Out in the Rain. Sybil mentioned something about my always writing something new for the Meacham. And in the early days, that was pretty standard. Because you did not want to read the same thing to the same audience, you know. We had a Meacham at the end of October and a Meacham at the end of March. And so we were constantly writing. Which leads me to say that I've been very prolific. And people ask me, why or how have you been so prolific? And I have to say, and this is part of my introduction, which will come a bit later, of Richard Jackson, I have to say that the entirety of my career up to 2022 has been trying to outbook, catch up with Rick Jackson. And so I did the math the other day. I published every 2 years and 3 months, I've published a book since the beginning of my career. Sonnet Left in the Rain. This is a completely new poem. At 4 o'clock today, Eastern Standard Time, I was still working on it. To get it ready for this Meacham, because that's the way that we did it in the old days, and we're celebrating, in many ways, the old days. Sonnet Left in the Rain. Circles of circle talk, the rounded edges of what neither of us wanted to say, could not circle back and fall face first into halfway falling in love again. The color of your eyes showed no surprise when the rhythm of our words fell apart so silently, like a thunderstorm without thunder. Joy, the flavor of the purple overcast, of wearing an evening black skirt, short as the shirts of summer. Bad weather blues and second-hand love mixed up like a cocktail constellation that seems to want to know or not when we looked up. The angle of angels across the sky that night we could not see. We recited by heart the position of stars, but memory edited out Venus. Neptune and the moon were dark purple black. It was raining, a crying rain that evening, quiet as quiet talk. We talked to the colors of umbrellas and smiled and laughed for the first time in a long time at the disappointment of storefront mannequin window people pretending to stop at crosswalks of second-hand love street when window shoppers were not looking for love. The air, October crisp, smelled of foreign love letters, fluently, unmailed, wasted, forever stamps. The fall of autumn leaves, blowing wind circles of smaller circles, decided decisions for us. The clinking cheers of champagne glasses moved the night evenly onto the stage presence of fragile hearts. We looked up to see how wet the sky opened up to be or not to be. In that restaurant that evening, I was afraid to stick my hands into your candlelit white wine rooms of reference, thinking in Faulknerian paragraphs of long, winding words. I could not remember the middle of what I was trying to say. So I told you about losing an umbrella in an elevator. I stared at another woman too long and got off on her floor. A yellow taxi ride there decided to imagine the fire in your fireplace room of reference. I imagine the way we used to be dancing in moonlight at night in black and white bedrooms of reference. You walked that evening to get there, carrying, like a schoolgirl, a backpack love affair, the eyes of which are never blind. Everything pretends not to see you walking, whispering rumors between the cracks in your convenience store of conversational adjustments. Smooth talk, lulled, bittersweet, chocolate sounds of delicious decisions guided the directions of our steps to the steps of the Piccola, Osteria, Siciliana, the absolute best restaurant to break up, then make up. The absolute best place on Fifth Avenue to break a relationship into delectable parts and pieces in half and leave with nothing but a signed, itemized receipt for what you paid for, but did not want to take home in a to-go box. It's funny how streetlights on Main Street remember what you were wearing that evening. Puddles of rainwater without intending to do so, awkwardly acknowledged the red tall heels of your Hollywood red carpet, red tall shoes, steep street steps. Do not forgive, do not forget. The beauty of that beautiful hole in the wall restaurant, upstairs and the crowded order of confusion, fancy with a beautiful monotone bourgeoisie way of looking at everything. Like $100 bill eyeliner around the eyes of the greeter, balancing the ballet of his sway, improvising, emphasizing where fine dining is measured exactly by the way you address the way the Maître D addresses you. Reservations for two. Right this way, they say. A talk show, slow walk, to be seated. Whisper to you that it loved you more than it would allow itself to love me, and my empty way of explaining explanations of empty seats and the spin of barroom stool myopics. On the broken edge, we sat where we sat, listening to the silence beneath the rhyming top of sonnets left out in the rain. Theatrical, sitting there in the shallow pockets of secondhand love. Right there, we cried like rain on a hot tin roof. Steaming up in that fancy place with a fancy Italian name too long to name. Upon our table placed a streetcar full of broken desire, the shape of a boat, a bread basket, garlic bread, fresh baked, voiced, no opinion to the kindness of olive oil. We painted smiles pretty enough not to be heard by the low voices of other tables. The uninvited ears of strangers always knows and realizes when glass forgets to fall softly upon hard decisions of love. I was afraid to write it down. But after the rapidity of rain, after the spin cycle spun out the wet, after the clothesline, after the sunshine in the forecast of your hair, this is what I wrote, the battered remains of a sonnet left out in the rain. I did not have to tell you to listen, Sarah. What was left, I read. Making up love, a song, a refrain, a window pane, reclining seat on a bullet train to Spain and back beneath the vanity of a weather vane, calling for more rain, a saxophone box jazz and John Coltrane, music left to remind and remain locked together forever, our luggage beneath an umbrella of rain. Lovers leap to sustain a stain more beautiful than the color. The insane wind of weather called us by name, a boarding pass, a plane, a return trip to Spain, beautiful as walking in the rain. And afterwards, Sarah, why, when, where, and while, you were talking about starfish and how they disappear at night. At the same time, stars come out at night. And how nobody really remembers who's wrong and who's right. And why it rains upon parades. And how rain boots are made for measuring the color of falling water. And how raincoats are made for make up love in the rain. Our sonnet had drowned Sarah, and we had become the rain band again, you said, to play the drum beats of our hearts again, Sarah. And the song on the radio was yet to decide to play, but already, Sarah, we were listening to our next song on the radio, whatever that song decided to be or not to be. I can do it. So I get the honor of the dishonor of introducing the star of the show. I could tell you that Richard Jackson took his students as far away as the moon to study poetry. If you count the number of times he took them, times the round-trip flights of knowledge. I could tell you Richard Jackson is the author of 18 books of poetry, 12 books of prose. I could tell you he's the winner of a Guggenheim, Fulbright, NEA, NEH fellowship. I could tell you he was awarded the Slovene Order of Medal, Freedom Medal. I could tell you his poems have appeared in 18 languages. I could tell you a lot of stuff about Rick Jackson, but I won't. But I will tell you this. Over the years, there have been a number of kinds of students at UTC, i.e. ROTC students, environmental science students, rock scholar students, art students, and Richard Jackson's students. Richard Jackson's students love him because he loved them. Reminds me when a professor said to the students, I am not here to teach you, I am here to love you. Love will teach you. In the heyday of the Meacham, Richard Jackson's students constituted one of the best undergraduate writing programs in America, and thus from my perspective, in the world. This is not just me saying this. Graduate writing programs across America acknowledge Richard Jackson's students in the form of grants, fellowships, and assistantships. We, I say it right now, could send our students anywhere they wanted to go. They were that good. Or they were seen. Is that good? And I think the collection on the table over there will prove that they were that good. His poetry, Richard Jackson's, his poetry are lines of wisdom. His lines open to the world another world. His poetry teaches us to write. His poetry teaches us to want to write. His heartstrings, a revelation in poetry. His heartbeat is a song that invites us to listen. His heart is his students. He planted them in fields of dreams and smiles them into being. If I had to choose 2 words to describe Richard Jackson, I would call him a cultivator. Richard Paul Jackson.
Thank you, Earl. My voice does not project very well. Can you hear me okay?
Yes. Yes.
And Meacham has been really amazing. And I appreciate everything that you said. You know, I think I've learned, and I told my students this, and they said, but I have learned more from them than I hoped that I taught them. You know, you get into a workshop and somebody says something and you think, damn, I never thought of it that way. You know, and so you get all these different kind of viewpoints and perspectives. And everything is always just a conversation. And for me, it was an amazing experience. And I think I owed as much of my development to my students as to anything else. When I saw that anthology the other day, Terry said, why don't you read one of those poems to me? And I couldn't. So I was so choked up. So, anyways, I hope you can get a hold of the anthology. It's as good as any anthology I've seen. Pam Ushak also has an anthology of, well, why don't you say something about it?
Yeah, I just put together a 414-page anthology of resistance writings, and there are lots of people in the Chattanooga area here in that collection, and you can order it, pre-order it at a special price. The price for this 414-page anthology of 112 poets and writers is $30, but here it's $25, so you can pre-order. Also, we have an anthology called The Nature of Nature and Human Nature, which Earl Braggs and Richard Jackson both have pieces in. Thank you very much.
So I was going back and forth in the last couple of days with several people and torturing them with. And so I finally decided on taking a huge chance and reading a long poem. The poem is based really on, I remember talking to the poet Charlie Simic once, and he was saying, he was describing how he wrote, he said, I wanted the poem to go to church, but it took me to the dog tracks. And this is what is happening in this poem in a way. It's a poem in which I argue with my poem. It's also about trying to get me to start over, or at least change what it's talking about. And so in a sense, you know, the poem is about how do you write about a death that's also a symptom of a larger war and of all wars, and maybe in a sense of our society. And it's based on I've been writing a lot of poems based on kind of structured by jazz principles. In other words, a lot of digressions, crosscuts, echoes, going back and forth. And so I realized this is going to be a little bit hard to listen to. And also it has a number of what I would call cameo appearances by Gogol, who was a real writer, a Russian writer. Leonardo da Vinci makes a small appearance. Cicero. Quantum physics, especially by some physicists named Carlo Rovelli, Einstein, Max Planck, and Heisenberg. Pascal and Leibniz, two philosophers, make their cameo appearances. Stephen Hawking, and Narcissus. And it's basically based on, I mean, the structure was, this is a straight piece by the free jazz writer Wayne Shorter. And he did this piece called Footprints. And so this is called Footprints in 8 tracks. And so it's 8 sections, and I'll just kind of do like that when I get to a section. You know, the basic, what the structure was, the subject was, there was a Ukrainian writer, Victoria Amelina. She was a journalist and a writer, and she spoke out against the atrocities that were happening there, which for me harked back to the things that I saw in Bosnia in the 80s and 90s. And she was struck down by a missile, and she was going to a pizza shop, because what the Russians were doing were not targeting military targets, but civilian targets. So it's called Footprints, 8 tracks. Don't lose your head over it, someone says. But I can't help beginning to think of Gogol, his characters, taking a whole story to search for his nose. So I realized that while our small talk passes through us unnoticed every day, like cosmic neutrinos, it's the tragedy here that is the danger of getting lost. Nameless bodies hidden, still hidden, among the sounds and rubble of Karnastock. I'm writing this while sitting along the river, the Tennessee River, listening to Wayne Shorter's Footprints as he alternates between simple and compound time, as if he were counting for the waltz and flow of memory in a future he somehow knew would be tragic. The notes arriving like that river barge on the Tennessee River, full of parts to fit some as yet unnamed machine. Yet as these words are waiting for a poem for the name Victoria Amelina, the Doxia, whose words offer their own field of pain, each image scattering in all directions, like electrons pushed out in the nucleus, an image hiding another image of scattered body parts. So instead, I think of the Wayne Shorter would push away from the melody, because you always have to travel beyond what the sound says, and towards the hidden scenes he'd imagine for each phrase. Or the way this river does not know where it is going, hiding whatever lies beneath its surface. Or the spaces between notes. Or how Leonardo's work in Florence was covered over by the critic Vasari. Or memories hidden in mass graves by the hive of yellow jackets. Which brings us back to the word head, which I began with, which is related to hive, which is why we can talk about thoughts buzzing in our heads, whose ideas are like the construction sites where the footprints don't match. But sometimes we fear what we know drifts away, like my earlier versions here, in a current random enough to bring puzzling evening reports that are more like the huge question mark the Webb telescope has spied about 1,400 light years away, which is not so far away as we might think from Victoria Emelina, as I try to let all these sounds and words play at once, ricocheting like shrapnel, as I revise entire scenes, questioning my ability to understand, to honestly emphasize and empathize. Because otherwise, as one survivor said, it seems like breathing the air from a balloon left by a dead man. Which is why it is so difficult to speak, and yet, as Cicero said, to keep silent is to give assent. And so I try not to focus on the shifting river currents or the egret's graceful swoop, yet hoping, like Stephen Hawking, to find a theory of everything. But in the end, it's like trying to follow the reddening sunset hovering around a buoy. An image which only reminds me of Amelina's Ria Pizza burning in Kronostok, where a spotter directed the Isklanda missile, though all he saw disappeared before he could even hear it. In this way, time loses direction. The past won't stay past, despite the labels that only mark a date that has expired. And when I look at my compass, the headings make no sense. Like a bird in an empty sky, Victoria wrote. We are trying, Wayne said, to make a music where you don't resolve anything. So that each time he played footprints, as if imagining tracks frozen in mud of another age, he played it differently. And how much of what Victoria could have written has gone the way of dark matter? Here, as evening slides slowly over the water, trying to breach the other bank, and moonlight dappling the surface into unread messages, I'm trying to trace my own footprints, lit by a moon that has been shrinking in diameter some 380 feet since its beginning, which means it is pulling less on our fluids in our heads each day, and so also on our moods, which most of the time are as out of control as this poem's improvisations, into whatever key is at hand, which is just a way to avoid the pain of imagining unspeakable details. There are colors you can't see connected to the ones you can, Wayne Shorter once said. Changing tempo and pitch, the way the barge's sound echoes off each building in different keys on the river. It's like Brownian motion in physics, where all the particles fly about randomly and seem to make a pattern to start anew. But to get at the cause, at our own beginning, as Stephen Hawking shows, is where time turns into space, linking this riverside scene to piles of rubble. And then the story of Victoria, caught by that missile, recorded perhaps from a drone hovering in these white spaces, which leads me to the ones those kids fly across the river, unaware of history, playing the innocent game of war. So maybe it is space, not time, that sweeps me along with all these intersecting details leading to what? What does it mean to write this single elegy among so many deaths? Maybe it's a question like asking what these early stars are looking for. Do you think they want to reclaim the light they lost? And how do we know if any truth wants to be found? The waterfall doesn't want to be listened to. The egrets don't care if you hear them. With nothing as guide, where do these quanta-like thoughts that roam across the river with those egrets come from? Some black hole of language? For instance, what prompted Victoria to write about Hannah and the tank planted in her garden? An image involving everyone who has lost everything, and meaning how a poem has to traverse beyond memory to find what it will become. Gogol himself gave up his dead souls by ending in mid-sentence. Wayne would sometimes stop and listen to the others play before deciding what direction the band would take. I was writing all this amidst the news of that missile strike at the restaurant in Konistok, a torture room in Bakhmut, a slaughter in Sybil, missiles into Ashkelon and Gaza, a bombing in, well, we picked the place. For, like Heisenberg, we can't be sure of any place in time. There is just the debris that settles after the bomb. I confess I once began all this, the buoy swaying like a head in the barge's wake, until I saw that shadow of a head peering from the fallen building, then the portrait of Amelia. When we look at our shadow, it is the head that is always the furthest away from us. It has no spot for the heart, nor the voices we should be hearing from among the few scattered memories, sifting the smoldering rhythms and ruins. Every thought ends up buried among the other thoughts. No wonder all I find is a pattern that is forever deserting me. This evening, all I see when I look up is a canvas spreading out from billions of years ago, before I had a stake in any of this. Maybe, after all, there is a link I don't understand between there and here, Victoria and all of us, between this peaceful setting and the far horrors we see that is so hard to face. Yet it's as if every sentence tries desperately to ignore the others. And that missile strike. Tomorrow the news will gather dust in the corner with the other memories. Quantum waves rippling through the grass down the slope in front of me have been arriving since the beginning. Yet Stephen Hawking says there is no beginning. And I feel as if I'm lost in that part of those ancient maps labeled unknown. Maybe all this means that the real world is an example of something we can't see. Wayne once said, sometimes the rabbit runs down the hole, and sometimes he falls into it. We'll never see the far end of the universe. The philosopher Pascal wrote that we live between infinitely small and infinitely huge worlds we can never really see. See how easily one emotion telescopes into another? Maybe all these jarring tones and moods are all we have to remind us we are never really where or when we are. Tonight I wondered about the moment Jesus thought he might escape. It's a moment we all know. It's like hoping that missile might have landed in an open field. Here, I'm still watching the buoy sway like a monk at prayer. Maybe the philosopher Leibniz, as a philosopher Leibniz thought, we need to find words to put a lighter mask upon the tragic just to survive, letting us say what we thought we couldn't say. So maybe it is no accident that I began with the reference to Gogol, who was born in the Ukrainian Cossack town of Sorochinsky, not far from the bombed restaurant in Krasnoyarsk, where Amelia was killed. Victoria spent her last days reporting the war crimes she fell victim to. Before long, we may need metal detectors to find our own hearts. It may be that each sentence is a battlefield of impossible solutions. And I hope now for some symbol, some sign like the cosmic microwave background noise linking us to our beginnings, to that Krasnoyarsk restaurant, to our own lost selves. I remember Victoria's own words still playing in my head. There were silences instead of much needed stories. Where there's a lack of true stories, there's a lack of trust. And I remember how the physicist Max Planck figured God is everywhere present, but the holiness of the unintelligible Godhead is conveyed by the holiness of symbols. Though mine often means the world we live in is so often just a vision in some funhouse mirror. Or like Narcissus, listening to his own echo, always out of reach. Or like the fact that, as with Wayne Shorter, there are only so many words between me and my own death. Victoria's unwritten words remain visible here among the daytime stars, lost forever. For as Wayne Shorter wrote, clouds float in the same path only once. But maybe also like that starlight voyaging out from its far side towards worlds we have yet to include, approaching where we all began, or this river searching for its beginning and its end. As Footprints lyrics go, we touch on the past now to show us where to go. Maybe the next poem, or a tentative prayer to whatever connects us, an impossible theory of everything, which is why I must end this elegy with a poem.
Thanks, everyone. Feel free to buy books, finish up the wine or the food, and we will hopefully see you tomorrow night back in the... Did you see my note?
Yes. Okay.